All right. I think we'll start off now. Thank you all for joining me today. We'll be talking a little bit on lean remote product development. And I think this is a very important topic given the current context. Um, I think all of us are forced to work from home, and we are constrained of all the resources that we took for granted. So a fantastic time to become lean and to become remote. And I think it is important to understand many of the things that we're going to have to do because of this crisis we should have done before regardless. And this is for all of us, right? All of us working on our businesses, many things that we took for granted, many contingencies we didn't plan for, things we should have put in place, things which were inefficient but we let stay, should have taken care of that stuff much before, right? That should be part of our regular flow itself. So this is an opportunity for us all to become lean, to become a more remote friendly company. And so we'll be discussing a little bit today about how we can do that and how we can have remote and lean product development, especially for startups. To give a bit of idea about the structure of the session, I'll start off with giving a bit of understanding as to why we need to be lean. I mean, it may seem obvious, but important to reiterate some parts of it. We'll talk about what it means to be lean, what a customer development cycle is, what an MVP is, what your product development cycle should look like. Um, how to ask the right questions, tracking the right metrics, goals for yourself, how to leverage being remote. And, we'll end off by giving a bit of introduction to what ISAFE is, what 100X.VC is. And then, of course, in the end, happy to share our contact details and answer any questions that we have. So that's the brief structure we have for the next hour or so. So let's start off with the need to be lean. Basically, what is a startup, right? Startup is something that creates a product under extreme uncertainty. That is the definition of running a startup. Everything is uncertain. Nothing is sure, right? You don't know when the next COVID is going to come, when the next world war is going to come, when the markets are down, when the markets are up, when your product is needed, when it's not, what the timing is, what if it's right, if it's wrong, etc. Nothing is uncertain. We only have hypotheses. We only have ideas that this might be true, but we do not know if it's true or not until we actually try to execute it, right? Nobody knows what a customer needs, right? Basically, there is high uncertainty again in terms of what does a customer need, right? We may be able to understand what a problem is, but that doesn't necessarily mean we know what the solution is, right? The problem to, let's say, being lost somewhere in sea and hungry is not giving an app which allows you to order food lost in sea, right? I mean, you're not going to get GPS. So that's kind of what it is, right? I mean, you don't know what a customer needs at a particular time. And the largest part of it is that biggest waste caused in startups is due to uselessness. What that means is most startups build something that is not needed by customers or consumers, which they don't really want to use, they may not use, they may not need to use, or are not motivated to use. It's not frequent enough, it's not a problem that they really care about, they're okay doing jugaad with that problem, that kind of stuff, right? That's what kills a startup. If it's something that people don't need, they're not going to be paying for it. If they're not paying for it, you're not making money. If you're not making money, I mean, the startup's not going to run. So that's why you need to be lean. The idea with being lean is to be able to navigate this uncertain environment in an agile manner, right? Just like software development moved from waterfall to agile, right? Waterfall was useful in environments where you had a fixed set of inputs and a fixed set of outputs. There was no uncertainty. But as and when more and more products came about which were built in a more uncertain environment, agile and iterative methods came along, right, which helped better improve the software development life cycle. So in a similar manner, for startups, being lean is essentially being agile enough to be able to change and adapt to time. So what does it mean to be lean? One part of it is you have to be able to undergo customer development and product development. um, Product development is the actual process of building the product. Customer development is getting an understanding about the customer, what are the needs, what are the problems, getting data, readying them to share that data, figuring out methods to gain that data, figuring out ways to constantly validate what you're doing, and to keep using that data to reiterate, right? Second part of it is you should be able to build fast, build iteratively, which means make small increments very quickly and with ease of change. That is, when you want to change the product, when you want to change the solution, when you want to change the customer itself, you should be able to do it really quickly, right? You should not have, in the end, startups are not large organization where you have tens of thousands of people in place, and it's in order to move to something else is a lot of inertia, right? Startups have no inertia, so you should have that ability to change quickly. And the last part of it is to be able to extend your runway until you're able to grow, right? Now, here I will not define runway as just the number of months you have to survive, right? To paraphrase Eric Ries, who started the lean startup movement, I'll define runway as how many more opportunities do I have to iterate or pivot? How many chances do I have to evolve the product, to change it to something else, until I potentially have a product which has product market fit, right? And that's what being lean means: the ability to develop your customers, develop your product in a fast iterative manner, to be able to change and to be able to last long enough, that you have enough opportunity to change and find a product market fit. um, so let's talk a little bit about the customer development cycle. Basically, if you don't know who the customer is, then you don't know what good quality is, right? I mean, you can build the best product in the world and it seems like art to you, but if that's not what the customer wants, or who the customer is and what it needs, then I mean, it doesn't matter what the quality is, right? Uselessness is a great equalizer of quality. Bad quality and good quality products are all useless equally. So it doesn't matter if you don't know who the customer is. So you need to be able to find the right customer for whom the problem is high frequency and high intensity, right? So idea is you need to find somebody, right? The whole point of customer development is to find people who, for whom this problem is high frequency, that means it occurs very frequently, and for whom it's high intensive, for whom it is a really really big pain point, right, which they really want to solve, right? Why is that important? Because that kind of a person will be the one who will actually pay for your product, who will be able to kind of give you honest feedback, and who will be able to help you iterate on the product, right? So idea with the customer development life cycle is to basically keep finding new and new customers, find new people who have a keen problem which is equivalent to what your solution is, and who are able to help pay for it, and of course help you gain data, gain feedback as to what needs to change about the product. One key part of this whole customer development life cycle is you need to know the good customers from the bad customers, right? There will be customers who will try to game your product. There will be customers who don't give honest feedback. There will be customers who try to take advantage. Get rid of them. They're not helping you. Their feedback is not important to you, right? And we'll get back to this a bit more, but idea with this customer development life cycle is to, one, gain customer feedback as much as possible. You need data, not features. Remember, from a customer, you're not looking to understand what is the feature is they need, right? WhatsApp is not going to come and ask you, hey, do you need WhatsApp video calling with more than 4 people? What they're going to do is they're going to look at the data that they have. They're going to ask you relevant data, but not the same question. They're not going to ask you for features. They're going to ask you for data and then drive insights from that. Customers do not know what features they want, and they do not know what features solve the problems they have, but they can give you on data on what problems are actually important to them, what problems are not important to them. Then you use this user feedback to iterate on the product, and we'll come back to defining iteration, but idea is to change the product bit by bit, using this data, using this feedback, drawing insights, and then you test it again. So the cycle is, you find good customers, you gain feedback from them by testing your product, you use that feedback to gain insights into the product as to what needs to change and change that. Once you've created a newer product, you test it again with customers, and so on and so forth. Before we go ahead, let's define an MVP. What is an MVP? It's the minimum set of features that require that you help you validate the problem at hand, right? It can be as simple as a website. So let's say you're thinking, I want to create a product which, cleans your home, like a robot that cleans your home, right? You may not even have to actually create the product. You just create a website, do some good SEO on it, and put it out there with broken links everywhere, just talking about we are building a cleaning robot. If you get traffic on that website, that means people are actually organic traffic, that is, people are actually looking for it. So this is something that people might need, right? So every step by step, an MVP is whatever helps you validate the problem at hand, tell you that what you're working on or the direction you're going in is correct, right? So so for example, let's take the case of Flipkart. In the beginning, they may not have had payments in place, right? I mean, payments was very tough. It was probably just a site where they were only listing their own products. It wasn't a full-fledged marketplace. They didn't have anything built as to who to how, any filtering, any allowances for other shops to put their products on, right? The only thing they had was a simple website where they had their own few books listed, and you could buy that and payments could be done offline, right? And once that was them MVP, and once they validated that yes, more people were buying, then they started integrating more features as to payments and adding the marketplace and so on, right? So what your MVP allows you to do is basically build only so much that you can validate the idea. If you build the whole product and in the end it turns out that the product is not required, that the product is not solving a problem that is actually there, then it's a waste of your time, your money, your human resources, your intelligence. It's just useless, regardless of how well made it is, right? So idea with an MVP is something that you can build very quickly, that can help you validate the problem you're trying to solve. And another definition I'd like to talk about is pivot versus iterate. To iterate means to change the solution, right? To change the solution means you get feedback from the customer saying, WhatsApp video may, I don't want 4 people only, I need 6 people or whatever. That's the data you're getting. So you change the solution. Whereas pivot is saying, I change the customer itself, right? The target market to whom I'm catering, I change that, right? There's a big difference between this. So to iterate is to change the solution to better meet the problem at hand, whereas to pivot is to completely change the problem at hand. Um, so now going into the product development life cycle. So this is again taken from Eric Ries's lean startup movement, right? The idea is to get an idea, right? Build it using code, or whatever else. I mean, I understand many startups are not software startups, but whatever it is, whatever your minimum version of the product is, right? The MVP, you build it, you try to sell it to customers. This is where the customer development cycle comes in, right? You leverage your customers to gain more data. Once you gain that data, you learn from it and gain ideas from it, and you use that ideas to build something new, right? So typically the flow here, as I would suggest, would be this, right? It is important to have a very fixed schedule in hand. Especially in the early days when you don't know what you're doing, how you're doing, if it actually works, if it doesn't work, etc. The ideal way to do it is set a development cycle timeline. So let's say I'm building a software in the logistics space, right? What I'll say is, okay, for my first MVP, I'm gonna set a cycle timeline of 2 weeks. So 2 weeks is sounds pretty good, but assumably that is the time I need for my MVP first version, right? So idea with the development cycle timeline is you keep sprints or pieces of 2 weeks, that every 2 weeks I keep build a new product. So let's say at the start of today I decide in 2 weeks I will have one version of my MVP ready. Then I decide who's responsible. Let's say you're a team of 3 or 4 developers, or whoever it is, right? You decide who's responsible for what, who's delegated what part of the code or product, etc. And you decide who's responsible for making sure everybody gets their stuff done, because that is another part of this whole process, right? Idea is to make sure people get stuff done. um, you have to figure out what are the KPIs you will be tracking over the next 2 weeks or whatever the development cycle timeline is, right? So KPIs are basically key performance indicators, and we'll come to that in the future. But idea with KPIs is they allow you to figure out their measures of what you're doing, and your business and how well you're doing, right? How well your business is going. So you have to choose your KPIs well, and you have to define them well as to what are the key performance indicators, what are the metrics you're looking to track, that you think will define your business, right? Third part of it is keep a theme for every cycle. So let's say for this particular cycle, my goal is to build the MVP with a few particular features. Then the next theme would be to increase potentially customer retention. A theme post that would be to increase my CLTV, right? So idea with every cycle is to know that every job that everybody is doing is towards one particular goal, one particular theme. It can be as simple as, by the end of this cycle I want to build something that will increase my revenue, right? Even that's a theme, right? But idea is everybody is aligned towards one goal. um, have a product meeting at the first day of the development cycle, right? This is a product meeting, you just have one meeting, right? Idea with this is, you guys don't have to do more than one meeting. Uh, don't waste time, right? um, Meetings take up a lot of time, and we'll talk about that in the future. But idea is, this is one meeting, you take as much time as you need. But in this particular meeting, what you'll do is, you will decide what your development cycle timeline is, you'll decide who's responsible, you will decide what are the KPIs you're tracking, what is the theme, you will brainstorm ideas for the product, right? You will figure out what are the bugs you need to fix, what are the new features you need to add, what are the things you need to test, what are the go to market strategies you need to test, etc. You prioritize them, right? You say, okay, this product, this particular feature is important to implement, this particular feature will drive up my KPIs the most, this particular bug, if I get rid of it, will be easy to do, it's a one day thing, and it'll also 2x my revenue, right? All those things you need to prioritize as per, what's their ease of solving, and what's the what's the effect on the KPI. And depending on the priority, then you take the top few and then you delegate among the people, right? Important to remember in this whole process is, you have to write out the specifications. Do not keep it verbal. Assumably, if you're like four engineers and you all discuss, okay, ye microservice tu banayega, ye microservice tu banayega, whatever, or you're building like a consumer product, robot or something, and you're saying, okay, you work on the hardware. Everybody has their own responsibilities, but because nothing is written down, everybody has their own idea, their own version of their responsibilities, right? So there's no common truth. So what issue that can create is, in the future, let's say after the development cycle ends, if you guys come together, if you guys come together and try to integrate, you realize, hey, this is not what I asked for in that specification, and there's a whole lot of miscommunication coming along, right? So you need to write out everything that you've discussed, that you've decided. At the end, everybody needs to test the specifications, right? Nobody can make a mistake. Allows you to find out small bugs that may have come across before you actually push the code or push the product to the consumer. So testing is very important, and do not interrupt the cycle. Many a times what may happen is, during the cycle I might get an idea saying, hey, what if I completely change this to this, and blah 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 blah, I change my product. But you're not helping, right? What you'll do is, essentially, you break everybody's flow, right? What people were doing, maybe they're halfway through what they're doing, they throw it away. They'll now focus on something new, and post completing that something new, you still don't have a guarantee whether it's gonna work or not, right? So idea is, you can wait. I mean, these cycles typically tend to be very very small, right? 2 weeks, 3 weeks max. So you can wait 2 to 3 weeks to give your idea. Do not interrupt the cycle, do not change the specifications in between, or throw anything that can potentially change the direction, unless it is extremely critical. Do not, right? You need to ask the right questions. So this is part of the customer development cycle, right? Idea is, if you need to gain data from customers, you need to ask them the right questions, right? So some questions you need to ask is, what is the hardest part about X? Let's say the problem you're thinking of is, I don't know how to buy books, or I have to go to. So what's the hardest part about buying books? I have to go to Crossword. It's too far away. When did you last encounter this? It happened maybe 2 weeks ago, but it happens every few weeks with me. I need to buy books almost every second week. Why was that hard? Traveling, it's too far. I have to pay for rickshaw. I have to pay for auto, whatever, train. How do you try to solve it? I tried to call them up. I tried to get a relative to pick it up and bring it to me. The next time they meet me, that relative looks close by. What did you hate? I had to rely on somebody else to get it for me, which sucked. And I had no fixed timelines as to when it would reach me. So this whole process told me, why is this problem important to me? What parts of the problem hurt me? Why conventional solutions, other than what is currently existing, any hacky solutions are not working? This is a way to gain data without actually telling them what you're actually thinking about, right? Because what you do is, by telling them, hey, would you be interested in a website for ordering books, you're asking a leading question. And what that does is, that creates biases in their heads. That doesn't give you true data, that gives you compromised data, right? That's dirty data. That's not going to help you in making decisions, because it's compromised. Many times people will say yes because they realize, oh, somebody is working on this, and I don't want to make him feel bad about it, so I just say, yeah, of course, I'll buy books online. Some people might be genuine, but you don't know. Some people, just because you ask, yeah, I might, hypothetically, but when it actually comes to it, you don't think it, you think it might not. So idea to gain data is, asking questions like these, right? What is the hardest part about your problem? When did you last encounter this? Why was it hard? Asking more about the problem and what hurts them about the problem is better than asking them about solutions, right? Asking them, would you consider my solution? That part comes after you build the solution and get it tested with them, right? Kind of thing. So asking the right questions are very important to getting the right data. You need to track the right metrics. The right metrics will allow you to figure out if your business is on the right track, right? So we have two metrics: a primary metric and a secondary metric. Primary metric is basically something that represents delivery of value to customer. It shows that the value is recurring, and it shows that that value is there instead of potential, right? Basically, I need to know that customers are actually getting something out of this product, that they are recurringly, matlab repeatably getting something out of this product, and that this value is actually there. It's not just potential, right? So for example, if you tell me something like, oh, I have LOIs worth of xxxx rupees, that's potential. That doesn't tell me how much value has been created. So I wouldn't consider potentially LOIs or pipeline as a primary metric, as the main metric, right? Whereas something like revenue or active users, those would typically be your best primary metrics. Revenue, almost all cases where you can make any kind of money, consider revenue your primary metric, because it if there's revenue, it means there's actual delivery. People are actually paying for this value that you're giving, so there is some delivery. If it's recurring revenue, then it means that people are coming again and again. And because people are paying, that means it's not just potential or hypothetical value, it's actually there. People are actually paying, right? Similar for active users. If they're using the platform, then there's some value they're gaining out of it. If they're coming again and again, daily, weekly, that's awesome for you. That means they really like it. There's recurring value. And because they're coming, it's a solid metric saying they're actually coming. It's not the potential of, oh, we have 100,000 signups. Signups is potential, but if you have 90,000 weekly active users, that's value, right? So your primary metric needs to show the value that is being created by the company. Secondary metric tells the rest 20% of the story, right? Primary metric will never tell you 100% of everything that's going on, right? Because in a hockey stick curve, for the first part of it, you'll see everything as flat in your primary metric, and then you'll see a boost. In those times, the secondary metrics tells a lot more of the story, right? um, which show the potential of a primary metric actually creating value. So this is where the potential part of it comes, right? So you typically create 3 to 5 of the secondary metric that you're tracking. They can be anything from what's your retention, what's your churn, what's your net promoter score, what's your GMV, what's your customer lifetime value, what's your average customer value, average cart value, etc. Right? So these secondary metrics tell the rest of the story. Why is it important to track all these metrics? Basically, let's say there's two parts of it. One part of it is, let's say you keep revenue as your number one metric, but you don't see revenue actually increasing, or it's not increasing fast enough. Which I would say anywhere from 5 to 10% weekly would be a good goal to keep. So idea is, we'll be talking a little bit about how to leverage being remote, right? And so the idea is, first part of it is, we don't have to take any meetings. The best part of being remote, right? Meetings are a big hassle for all of us. What happens is, you're in an office, you're with your 5 6 co-founders, co-workers, whatever. Every small decision you want to take, you'll say, hey, let's gather around, let's talk together, let's iterate on this, right? And you'll synchronously take up not just your time but everybody else's time. And that's very bad, because that's a lot of waste of time. So nobody gets anything done in that time. So when you're remote, what you can do is no meetings, just the one meeting in the product development cycle, right? And that's it. And the rest of the time, any communication that needs to happen, make it asynchronous. There's email, there's Slack, there's WhatsApp, there's SMS, there's all these means. If something's that urgent, you can call somebody up for sure. But that can be a one-to-one conversation, rather than having a meeting where multiple people are involved and multiple people's time is taken up. So any consensus that needs to be made does not happen to have in meetings, right? Does not need to have. What you can do is, just you can take it to asynchronous communication. You can have consensus on Slack polls. You can have consensus on so idea with this is, essentially, goal is to not have um,
meetings. Goal is to not waste time on meetings. It takes up a lot of time for everybody. Have as much asynchronous communication as possible. Um, any involuntary disturbances will be gone, right? And you can make decisions beforehand. So instead of saying, okay, we'll push it off to a later time, let's have a meeting tomorrow to discuss this, you can just say, okay, today we're having the one product development meeting. All decisions are made on this meeting, and then anything and everything else, you've got to do it on your own, right? So any decisions that have to be made, your hand is forced to make it in that one meeting, right? What this allows you to do is to basically not waste anybody's time, have as much asynchronous communication as possible so that people can share ideas, form consensus on their own time. Anything that is not mission critical gets pushed off for later, right? People can focus on the creative part of the job rather than focusing on the mundane parts like creating documents, creating, writing down notes from meetings, setting up meetings, finding a common time, setting up meeting, blah, blah, blah. All of that hassle is gone. You can focus on what is important for you. What are your KPIs personally, right? Your KPIs, uh, writing of a particular feature of code, then that is what you'll focus on, right? All the decisions for that feature have to be made beforehand so that you don't have any meetings later on, right? Um, so idea is to put a structure in place in the company where you are able to do this with as little interoperability as possible, not interoperability, but interference as possible. Idea is to optimize this development cycle that we're talking about, right? You should be able to have one meeting where you discuss what your KPIs are for the next week, next 2 weeks, whatever it is, right? Figure out what each person's responsibilities are, who's responsible for tracking whether people are doing the stuff. What are the ideas that need to be prioritized? What are the ideas that don't need to be prioritized? What are important? What are the expectations at the end of this particular cycle of development? And then that's it. All further communication asynchronous until the next development cycle timeline, right? So that saves a lot of time and that helps you to do work more efficiently. And that's the idea being remote. And this stays not just for now where you're essentially forced to being remote, but this is something you can leverage even when you're actually back in office. Imagine you're a 5 people startup. What you can do is, you don't need, even when you're in office, to have meetings for everything or to have any involuntary disturbances, right? Or to communicate everything then and there. These are learnings that you can take into your office space as well, having decisions made beforehand so that everybody knows what needs to be done. So we can leverage this hand that's been forced upon us right now, to basically make sure that our company is a lot more agile and lean and flexible for being remote. The longer term benefit of this is, employees of course tend to become happier because of this, because being remote allows them to stay at home with family, especially if you have parents, kids you want to hang with, spend time with. That's amazing. Employees can actually focus on what is important in their work, and pay attention and prioritize on their own basis rather than having to prioritize as per बाजू वाले ने क्या बोला या बॉस ने क्या बोला, right? It's like, just because you're the guy sitting beside you in the office says, hey, do this, you'll have to do it. But when you're remote, you don't have to do it. You can prioritize, right? It's asynchronous. You do your own stuff first and then you help others out. And those are benefits of being remote. So of course, the side benefit of being remote is, of course, if you're comfortable being a remote team, you can all do work on your own time and you do not need to spend on office space, which is a big part of being lean, right? The lesser you spend in the early days, the more runway, the more chances of pivoting and iterating you have. So some things about remote. Anyway, to give a brief introduction, about iSafe and 100X.VC. So 100X.VC is a early stage venture fund, India focused. We started last July. The way we work is we do two things. One is we invest only through the iSafe, which is the India Simple Agreement for Future Equity. This is a standard document that does exactly three things for founders. One is it's all future equity, right? And at a future valuation. So idea is you don't need to decide what your worth is, what your valuation is as a company right now. You put it off to a later stage, right? And second is it's all future equity. So as an investor, if I get anything, I only get equity. Unlike a convertible note, this is not debt. So I can't say 5 years down, hey, this is not working out. Please give me back my principal with, so and so interest over the last 5 years. If I get anything as an investor, I only get equity. Second part of it is it's really quick. You can execute a document typically within a week. An iSafe, which compared to like an SHA would take you easily 3 months. From term sheet to DD to everything from shareholder agreement creator, everything, creating the shares, distributing them, getting the money in the bank. It's a very lengthy process, right? Third part of it is it's a very standard document. With very few rights given to the investors. So there are a few liquidation rights, few consent matters, but beyond that, most stuff is gone. Right? There's no board seat, there's no voting rights. There's no founder lock-in. There's no talk about founder salary. All stuff is gone. Right. So investors don't have draconian power over founders, and because it's a standard 5-page document, any of you can read it. No need for as much legal cost ke bhai mera SHA padho, is it good, is it bad, what not. That whole hoopla is gone. And the whole idea with this is basically what you can do is rather than having to wait 3-6 months to raise funds through an SHA where you fill up the whole round and you then do the whole SHA process, what you can do is as and when you start getting commitments, you cut iSafes for each angel. So you can read more on our website at 100x.vc/iSafe. And we have an email ID, iSafe@100x.vc, in case you have questions. And to give more background on 100x.VC, we invest exclusively through iSafe in Indian startup. The goal is to be the first investor in a portcos, or at least one of the earliest first institutional investors, and to work very closely, very actively with our portcos for 3 to 6 months post investment, wherein we work with them to refine the pitch, help refine the pitch, help refine the go-to-market, help refine the business model, help them get right clients, partners, connects that they require, get them to a point where they're more investable, and help them raise a larger round of funding post us through the VC pitch day, which is where we showcase our portfolio companies in front of our network of investors, including VCs, family offices, angels, corporate VCs, etc. We made 20 investments, which we showcased on our first VC pitch day in December last year, which was class 1 of 100X.VC, and we're currently actively looking for class 2 of 100X.VC. So feel free to reach out to us at pitch@100x.vc if you'd like to talk and see if we can work together. Drop your notes, talk to us about anything you want to on our Twitter at 100x_VC is our Twitter handle, and my personal Twitter handle is wasupk. And so with that, I think we'll move to questions and answers. So if any of you have question answers, please post them on the chat here, and I'll kind of start going through them and see if there's anything I can help you guys out with. Great. So first question from Himanshu. He asks, hi Vatsal, we are essential goods consumer-based e-commerce website. Would you consider having 72% customer retention and generating 1.5 lakhs in sales as reaching proof of concept stage? So this is a subjective question. Himanshu was asking, we are essential goods consumer-based e-commerce website. Would you consider having 72% customer retention and generating 1.5 lakhs in sales as reaching proof of concept stage? So, so idea is this is very subjective, Himanshu. What I'm not sure what you mean by proof of concept, but idea with saying that this is a business worth building is to be able to build it, right? I mean, if you are able to create revenue, great, but are you able to grow as fast as you want to? Are uh, are you able to get customers as quickly as you want to, and so on, right? So if you're having making some sales or generating good retention, but these are KPIs and goals that you need to keep in place, right? I mean, without understanding about a business, you can't really figure out. So one good way to think about is okay, you're a goods consumer based e-commerce website. So what are your competitors? What are your parallels? Are there any incumbents in this particular space? And what were their metrics in the early stages? Are you equivalent? Are you better? Are you worse off? Right? Because this helps you, okay, if somebody else has done it and they have been successful, then if I'm on a similar path to them, then potentially, right, it's not a sure sign, but potentially I'm on a similar sign, on a similar path. But idea is, even if you're, let's say, if you think, okay, I'm at a proof of concept stage where I think there is some sort of requirement for my MVP. Johnson, you were asking me how important is it to have MVP in place as per. So minimum viable product is basically, it's something that is not tough to build, right? It's something you can build very quickly within a week or two. And minimum viable product is something that will actually allow you to validate if your product has a market or not, right? So it is absolutely critical to your business to be able to build an MVP and to be able to build it very quickly, to be able to ship it, to be able to gain customer feedback, and to be able to pivot as and when required, kind of thing, right? So I would say very important, Johnson. So somebody asked me, Kapil Sharma, how do you suggest to prioritize development, immediate need, or something experiential, which if works can go really big? So I think that is again something that you need to figure out. So key to remember here again is to keep those metrics in place, right? You need to figure out what is it the immediate need or something experiential, which can help build your metrics. And if it is something large and experiential, can you break it down into smaller, easier chunks that you can build over multiple development cycles, right? So idea is every development cycle try to ship as much as possible, because what happens is, if you try to build something experiential, which yes will move your metrics, will, let's say, triple your revenue once it's up as a feature, but if it takes you like 6 months to build it, then it's not worth it, right? Because that means for the rest of the time you're doing nothing else to the product. So idea is to break it down into smaller chunks or tasks which you can do, which will allow you to incrementally change your product and add and still drive up your key metrics. So important again, while prioritizing tasks is to figure out, on the one hand, what is easier to make, and on the other hand, which one will drive up my key metrics, whether it's revenue, whether it's um, active users, or whether it's GMV or whatever you're tracking up, right? So I hope that answers your question, Kapil. um, um, So how important is the product to be ready to raise funds for from a VC? Nowadays, do VCs fund on ideation? Is what Mithilesh is asking. So from a 100X.VC perspective, we do not fund at an ideation stage. We prefer to see, founders have a little bit of skin in the game before we come in. And yes, from our side, we would prefer at least an MVP in place, because what that tells us is, yes, the founder's taken the effort to build what is required, to put his skin in the game. And second part of it is that MVP can allow us as well. Like I said, MVP is basically something that allows you to validate your hypothesis of a market. So once an MVP is built and some validation is received, that is when VC can say, okay, there seems to be some validation and we can potentially help them scale this up, right? So I would suggest that at least minimum viable product is required from fundraising. Most VC, from a 100x perspective, I cannot comment for other VCs.